If you want this not to be a negative campaign on your part, and all your publicity suggests that that is the way you're trying to couch it, aren't you going to have to spell out in detail what the Scottish Parliament's powers would be and how Scotland would fit in the rest of the United Kingdom after a referendum?
Well, look, firstly, I do want to fight a positive campaign because I think that there's a lot to be said in favour of maintaining our membership of the United Kingdom, the grounds of family and friendships, trade, economy, as well as the fact we share political, economic and cultural institutions. There's a lot that binds us together. And indeed, you know, our campaign theme of better together really says it all. I think on your second point, the first question surely that we in Scotland have to answer is, do we want to stay in the UK or do we want to leave? If we want to leave, there are all sorts of consequences then. If we are going to stay in the UK, then of course then you look and see whether or not there are to be additional powers for the Scottish Parliament. Indeed, it's getting new tax powers in 2016. That's something we started and the present government have continued with. So I think it will be a positive campaign, but you know, the second question issue is, you know, you look at the deeper politics here. It's got an awful lot to do with the fact that I don't think the nationalists believe they can win the first question. They're frightened of one question, and that's why they want two.
But you see, for a lot of people listening who are not in Scotland, I mean, they will want to know precisely what is on offer for Scots if they say no to independence. And the truth is that something will be on offer in terms of more power, won't it?
Well, if people vote to stay in the UK, then, you know, then of course then there's a number of suggestions, and there's by no means a unified view in Scotland as to what else the Scottish Parliament might, what additional powers it might have.
Certainly not among the three parties who joined together in your campaign.
Not amongst the population as a whole, you know, but certainly, you know, in relation to giving the Scottish Parliament more responsibility for raising the money as well as the being able to spend it. That's something, you know, I've talked about in the past. But the key thing, though, first of all, we've got to deal with is, are we staying in the UK or not? Now, you know, for people not living in Scotland, you know, I remind you that in 2011, the Nationalists won a majority in the Scottish Parliament. The Nationalists stand for independence. That's what they're for. They're entitled to put that to the Scottish people. I just wish we could get on and have that vote once and for all. This has been a thing that's dominated Scottish politics for the last 30 or 40 years. Now is the time for us to be allowed to vote on the subject. Do we want independence? Do we want to stay as part of the United Kingdom? As I said to you, I'm ready to fight a very positive campaign on that, because the more you look at this, the more advantages there are in terms of trade, businesses, prosperity, the sharing of risks, the fact that people in Scotland, along with people in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, can influence world events because of the size of the UK, in Europe too. There is a very, very positive case to be made, but you've got to answer that question first before you come on to what is it you might want to do to change what is the devolutionary settlement at the moment.
Indeed, but you can argue that independence is a much less scary notion for many people, not all, but for many people in Scotland than once it was. And we know that Alex Salmond says, hang on, if you're worried about, you know, chucking out everything that the union means, remember this, that the Queen will still be the head of state. He says that Scotland would be in the sterling area, and that Scotland, compared with countries of similar size elsewhere in Europe, would be quite likely to prosper, because there are other countries that he could point to, and we know that he lists them all the time, that have done pretty well. What is there to be scared of? That's what he says. How do you answer that without appearing to be a doom-monger and a scaremonger?
Well, look, firstly, I entirely agree that you can't scare people out of it. My argument isn't that Scotland couldn't go it alone. I mean, most countries can, and we would be quite heavily dependent and exposed to the fortunes of North Sea oil if we did that, but you could do it. My argument is actually, well, what's best for Scotland? And I think what's interesting is, if all the polling that's been done, and you know, over the last few months, what it shows is that I think when it comes to the bit, most people in Scotland, they'll look at the emotions, and yes, that cuts both ways, as I shall argue today. It isn't just a one-way thing. You know, there's powerful emotions on my side of the argument, but they also look at the practicalities. And if you take one, for example, you know, in relation to the currency, you're right that Alex Salmond has gone out of his way to assure people that everything will change, but nothing will change. You know, he's even now saying you can call you'll still be British even though you've left. If you take the pound, what he's saying is he knows that it would be toxic to advocate the euro, which used to be his policy. He's saying saying we keep the pound, we enter into a currency union with the rest of the UK, and by the way, not asking the rest of the UK whether they want that, and you enter into the sort of currency union you've got in the Eurozone just now. Now, my argument there is, why on earth would you want to do that when everybody knows that a currency union inevitably takes you to closer economic and then political union? In other words, you end up back where you started after an awful lot of trauma and disruption and so on. So, I don't think you can have it both ways. You can, if you want to leave the UK, that's an argument he can put. But to argue that somehow it isn't going to change anything at all, well, what's the point of it? And yes, you're right. He does point to other countries. Though his list does vary. I think you'll find that Ireland and Iceland, which used to compare us with, are now off the list.